retreat. At the ending of the retreat, driving away, down just on the road there, sobbing. After 10 days of practicing non-clinging, I was clinging worse than ever to the beautiful states that I was about to lose. So, each of us are going to be different. We've had all this practice together. It could be like that for some of you. Some of you kind of in between. For some of you, it might be like really happy, like get out of prison kind of a thing or something. So, we're all just checking into how it is, because this is how it is, right? We move into kind of the monastery, into the cave, into the retreat. We move back out into the world, and so it's like this. And so there's always a coming going, and so the form changes. And we're all going to go into each of our own, right, whatever our life circumstances are. And some of you have shared with me. Some of you are coming home and looking forward and having kind of an easeful. Some of you will be going. Some of us will be going home to challenging. For some very challenging situations. And so this is how it is for us. And so we'll spend some time now in our closing. I want to offer. Here's how we'll use the time. I want to give, it's not a full blast Dharma talk, but I guess it's like a mini talk. I want to share some thoughts about, some of my own thoughts about maybe some things to reflect on to go home. We'll have time for some Q&A. Some few of you have left some notes. We'll answer those. We'll have a chance to discuss things, some questions. We'll have a few other then. After that, I have a few more thoughts about practicality, about things about reintegrating and things like that. Sometimes we may not realize that we've gotten more sensitive, deeper than we realize, more sensitive than we realize. And there's some of you who are experienced know, but especially if you're newer, a few just basic tips that can make the reentry less bumpy. It all smooths out for everyone, so don't worry. But sometimes we come home and, for example, people, you're on retreat, everything's good, you go home, and you just get in an argument with your roommate right away. It's like, what happened? Well, it's just an energetic thing that the sensitivity got ahead of the equanimity. And so that's going to happen. So we be aware of these kind of things, and it can happen. So I'll say a few things about that. We'll do retake the precepts, but in different words that are more daily life kind of words. We'll do a little dedication of merit, and that's kind of how we use our time. And we certainly will end on time by 4 o'clock, but we may actually end earlier, so we'll just see how that goes. So that's what I have in mind. Okay. So let me this is the mini talk part. A number of years ago, there was a Buddhist, I guess it was like a traveling show, some of the Tibetans were put on, where they were brought to town, Buddhist relics. And if you don't know what the relics are, is like if some saint, great master, teacher, whatever, dies, and then they cremate the body, and then from the ashes there might be little bits of bone, or sometimes you get some kind of these glassy spheres, I don't know where that came from, and they'll take little pieces out from the cremation, what was left over, and put them in little urns and everything, and then it's kind of those are the relics of that master, and it's sort of you'll see people like bowing to them and everything. It's not really meant as a worship, but just out of a respect, a reverence. It's just bringing back appreciation for that great teacher and a way of recollecting. So that's what the relics were. And so came to town. This was in Berkeley, down in the San Francisco Bay Area, and all the Buddhists from all different traditions came in, and it was kind of like a Buddhist Woodstock or something like that. And it was pretty fun. And they said ahead of time, like they got like the Buddha and all these great figures from the past there. And I have to say, like, I don't believe that those relics are of the Buddha. I don't know. So I'm not making a big deal about it, but if you ask me, it's like, I just don't believe it. After 2,500 years, it's like that was just been lost. Whether there were even relics, we don't know. So I wasn't that skeptical. It's just like, that's cool, you do it and go there. So it caught me by surprise when you go through and they have this whole thing, and finally you get to the relic and there's a glass bowl. There's a little like black speck in it. And there's a sign, it said, Shakyamuni Buddha. That's our Buddha. Shakyamuni means sage of the Shakyan clan. That's his clan name. I burst into tears. And the person's with me, that's the Buddha, when I can, whatever. It's like, and it just hit me. It just brought it so back alive somehow. And I got the power of these relics that in whatever way had any mattered at all, that's the Buddha. So it's like, okay, move on to the next one. Sariputta and Mahamoggallana, there they are in the jars. Well, those were the Buddha's two chief disciples. And when you look back at the old Pali texts, their names come up a lot, and there's stories about them and everything. There they are. And then go to the next one. Ananda. Ananda was the Buddha's younger cousin. And for the last 25 years of the Buddha's life, Ananda was the Buddha's personal attendant. And in fact, if you go back to the old Pali, just getting off to a little history just for a bit, if you go back to the old Pali texts, none of that stuff was written down. It was passed as an oral tradition. And according to tradition, after the Buddha died, there was a gathering of, they say 500. When they use the word 500, it just means a lot, of monks. There were the women were practitioners and were considered fully enlightened too. That's just how it was. I didn't let the women in for this. It's kind of like that. So the men came together, and it said that Ananda, he had been around for all the Dharma talks and for everything, so they would question Ananda and say, remember the time? And Ananda go, oh yeah, when the master said this, and he would tell the story. And those became the seeds of the suttas. And so when you read a lot of the suttas, they begin with, thus have I heard. That's Ananda speaking to you. Excuse me. So when I read, thus have I heard, I just feel like Ananda's talking to me, right? It brings it kind of alive. It's like, oh my God. I'm kind of teared up, and I feel a little emotion of it right now. It's like the echo. There was Ananda right in the thing there. Keep going. Some other characters. Kondonya. Now, Kondonya is my favorite. According to tradition, after the Buddha got his enlightenment, so after he left home, they said he'd been a prince. He was actually, his father was probably a chieftain of the clan. So he was raised, with his father was the chief, and they say a prince and the king. But we don't really know. And then when he was at age 29, he left home, and he spent 6 years wandering and doing all these ascetic practices that were in vogue, yogic, and he almost died, and he did all this stuff. And then he realized he was getting some benefit, but it didn't really get him what he wanted. And so then he turned to these other kind of the practices that we have, and it said, he got his final enlightenment. He's under the Bodhi tree, the whole story. And then it said he thought, he was trying to think, well, this is kind of deep. Who am I going to teach this to and get it? And he says, I'm going to go back to my buddies who I practice with, who are called the 5 ascetics. There's these 5 guys. Buddha went and found the 5 ascetics. There's whole stories. It's kind of, if you like the life of the Buddha, some of these stories can be kind of fun and interesting. And what it said is, the Buddha was, we gave him on the Four Noble Truths or something like that, the talk, and it said Kondonya got it. and he had this profound awakening or liberation experience. And the text even says, it has with exclamation marks, the Buddha saying, Kondonya's got it, Kondonya's got it. And then it said, according to the tradition, they discount the other yogic traditions where people have amazing enlightenment. Buddhism, we're the only ones that got the real enlightenment. So there was only the Buddha being fully enlightened. And then once Kondonya goes, now there were 2 arahants in the world. It's all heavy and everything. There's Kondonya, he's right there in the bowl. So keep going along, different characters. And then finally got around to some people who actually were more contemporary, who I knew, like a guy named Lama Yeshe, who died back in the 70s or 80s, and actually his stupa's in the Santa Cruz Mountains. He had a thing there, and I knew that's the real relic there and everything. So that was kind of the experience. And so I was reflecting, just telling you that, because it just brought back for me so alive kind of what was going on back then. And when you think about it, when in those days, more than 2,500 years ago, it was as real as this is real right now. They were actually literally just these real people sitting there having these conversations doing it. And the suttas are filled with stories of people who heard these teachings, did these practices, people just like us, this idea of whatever this enlightenment is we talk about, or liberation, it can feel so remote. And I want to come back and say something about that. I think it turns out it may not be as remote as we may think. So we can say more about that. But it said so many people were getting all this enlightenment back then. We don't really know. Traditions kind of, things of, the Buddha was a man. Now we've got him floating in the sky. And so we don't really know. But something must have been going on, and I kind of reflect back, what might that have been? And I'm imagining that, of course, it said the Buddha was a skillful teacher. It said he had these psychic powers. We don't know, but that he knew how to connect with his audience just perfectly. So maybe so. He must have had a pretty profound presence, whatever. But I also really imagine that those people, if they really thought this was he wasn't called the Buddha then, but he was whatever they called him. He used the term the Tathagata, actually, to refer to himself in the third person, and people would call him the Tathagata. It just means thus gone. One is gone this thusly. It was kind of, and if you were hanging out with him, I bet you the quality of your receptiveness and listening would be on a whole nother level. That's what I'm imagining. And I'm wondering for us here, like for all of us, if the Buddha someone was here and we really thought like that was the real Buddha, I think our receptiveness would be on a whole nother level to receive, right? And so I want to have this idea that I think is kind of a lovely idea about that level of the Buddha still teaching, or life as our teacher, and that level of receptiveness is something we can, I'm going to say more about it, take on a little bit, especially moving out into life and how we use life, where we can start to shift our relationship maybe, where instead of being in such a battle all the time with, or however much with things, that we really can consciously, when you can remember, when it's appropriate, start to take on life consciously as your teacher. And so I'll say a little more about that. And so I was thinking not only the Buddha, but all of these great masters who lived, and the stories of them. They were people, some of these people, when you hear the stories, they're more messed up than you. They were people who were like with prostitutes, or maybe that's not more messed up than you. I want to be careful not to trigger anyone off, but that's not the worst thing. But there was one guy, Angulimala, serial killer. Angulimala, so he had this evil this is the story. He had an evil master who told him to go out and to kill 100 people and chop off their fingers and collect it on a garland around their neck. So that's kind of gruesome. I guess he had like the finger bones on there, whatever. So he was a known serial killer. And then the story is he only needed one more victim to get to his 100. And these stories is that he found the Buddha. Okay, I'm going to get this guy. And the Buddha was just slowly walking. And Angulimala was going, and no matter how fast, even when Angulimala was running, he couldn't catch the Buddha, even though the Buddha was just kind of walking. So it's kind of a mystical kind of thing. And then Angulimala yelled, "Stop." And the story is the Buddha says, I have stopped. I've stopped harming beings. And he gives them this whole teaching, which was just amazing. And something shifted in Angulimala. And it said the serial killer kind of became this word arahant, that's fully enlightened, like you're a Buddha. Right? It still said every time he'd go to a village to collect alms, people would stone him and try to kill him. And the Buddha would just say, hey, this is your karma, and you've got to hang, whatever. So, but this, according to the tradition, now we don't really know, but they're good teaching stories. I think the point is, even me, with all my defilements and everything that's all messed up about me or whatever, I can do it, and you can do it. That's the teaching of it. So I think this is kind of the message, I think, of these great masters there in the bowls. What's their message? Part of the message is that there is actually fruits of these practices, and we use these terms: liberation, awakening, realization, enlightenment, whatever you like. However much or little we take that, whatever, is a real, I bet there's so many people, I'm sure, I don't know everyone here, I got to talk one-on-one with a lot of you, not everyone, and here, certainly at least many of us have seen for ourselves results of what happens when we apply ourselves in a wholesome direction, right? So we can start to apply these teachings to help us, right? So I say that because we think of the people in the past, but us here now, today, in this tradition that's kept alive for 2,500 years, it's been an unbroken chain. It's evolved and changed as anything would, and to fit each culture and each time, but it's been an unbroken chain. We're the living link in that chain right now. We are all the students, right, of the previous generation. We are all the elders for the next generation. It's not anybody else. It's me and it is you. It's not only someone sitting up here, that's good, yes. It is all of us to come and to actualize the potential. And then in the example of how we live, whether in a formal teaching role or in different ways, just by living life and encountering people, we actually are the transmission of that, and we carry on the legacy of the great masters. So that's something you can kind of hold, which I see as a great, it's a gift that gets offered to us. It's a gift that we can transmit on to others. And if this way of holding it, you have to see if you relate to that. But I find it has a good feeling to it. And I find it can help me, especially if I can remember in the difficult times, if I can, that's not always easy, believe me, I understand that. We'll forget a lot. But if we can remember, it could help influence, like, how do I want to respond in this situation? And it may not always be just according to our feelings, right? If we're always responding according to our feelings, well, feelings, yeah, maybe that's not a good strategy for attaining happiness. That's all I want to say about that, okay? So, a few more things here. So there is something I heard someone say once, I don't remember where I got this from, but I kind of liked it. I'll just offer it. You may or may not relate to it. They say, one way to go around is imagine that everybody is fully enlightened or awakened, except you. And everything they're doing is for your benefit and how you might hold it. Now, that's kind of a little weird, but I want to give you an example for this. That you don't have to hold it like that. So I've shared, I think I said here, like I'm sure we all have really beautiful aspirations and intentions for how we want to live, the qualities we want to develop, how we want to show up in the world. And I don't remember, I might have said here, so one of my aspirations that I take very seriously is to live in a way that my heart never closes off to any beings, period. And that's an aspiration. It may be too idealistic, I don't know, but I go back to that, especially in the times when I don't feel like it. And that person really is a jerk. And I'm going to let them know, or whatever like that, like in those times, okay, what am I going to do? And then I go back, if I can remember, like a touchstone or an anchor to my aspiration, and then see. And there are some things that might be too much for us. And we want to recognize that. Here I'm in Canada. I know everybody in Canada is nice, and you're not crazy like my country. And as I said the other day, I don't assume we all have the same politics, but there's certain well-known political figure in my country whose name shall not be, but it rhymes with chump. Which is the nickname we should all be using, by the way. But anyway, maybe that's a line too. I think that's outside my circle, to be honest with you. I did say to my wife recently, I said, we're Buddhists and everything, but I was like, I kind of want him to suffer. I said that to her. Is that all right? Is that allowed? I just need it. Really, I don't know, but I just shoot my mouth. But it can feel that way is my point. So we have to recognize we work the best we can. Way back, I used to work, have my degrees in electrical engineering. I worked in Silicon Valley for some of the, like Intel, the people make the computer chips and stuff. I worked there. It's funny now, I literally have to get my kid to tell me how to work my phone. I don't remember, everything's changed. But back then I was kind of in the technology. And if you probably don't know the geography there, but I lived in Santa Cruz, which is near the ocean, and then to get to Silicon Valley, it'd be a 45-minute commute, and I'd drive through the Santa Cruz Mountains and into Silicon Valley. And I used to chant, there's this sutta, sutra in Sanskrit, sutta in Pali, they're the discourses, right? And by the way, that word sutra, it's related to the English word suture, like a thread. So it's kind of a continuity or thread of the teaching. So just a little FYI. There's a metta, loving kindness sutta, a particular one. I would chant the metta sutta while I was driving. And it's lovely. It's like, you're radiating metta to all beings, omitting none, those near or far, seen and unseen, friends, enemies. It's lovely. So here's what happened. I'm driving. I'm in the right-hand lane. I don't know maybe you're the same in the U.S., but left-hand lane is like the passing lane, or we call right-hand slow, fast lane, whatever. I'm in the right-hand lane. Driving along, I don't know what, some guy just in a sports car zooms up right up on my ass. All right, and he's right there giving me his attitude with his car, and I'm just like, what the? And then he whips around me, looks over at me, didn't flip me off, but looks over at me with his attitude, whips around right in front of me, and then he takes off. I don't know what was going on with him. Maybe I was doing something that I thought I was just driving along. Who knows? Maybe he's just a jerk. I don't know what was going on. Here's what happened in my mind. You want to see how defiled my mind was. Of course, this could never happen now, but I'm chanting, as I look over him, I'm chanting, may all beings near or far, seen and unseen, asshole. And then I go back to, near to me, far away, all beings. And it took a few seconds, and all of a sudden, I realized that, wait a minute, what just happened, right? That guy did me a favor. Because what we're doing is shifting the conditioned patterns in our minds. That's one way to think about it. We use this word conditioning, and so from it, neural pathways light up, or we call it conditioned pattern, right? I don't know if literally they're the grooves of the brain, but we talk about, think the groove of the brain gets worn and the patterns, right? So we're trying to liberate from our conditioning, and if you want to, we got to get at our conditioning to kind of see what it is and everything, so we can see how to change it. Well, how do you get a handle on your conditioning? You can't get it. You can't get to it. Where is it? You only get to it when a pattern lights up into consciousness. Then your conditioning's there, right? If we want to be liberated from our suffering and the causes of suffering, we have to come. I'm sorry, it's bad news. We have to come to know our suffering. How do we know and learn? Through experience. I mentioned, I think, at the beginning of this retreat that there are paths of practice that seek out suffering. Maybe they'll purposely have you sit longer to gin up some pain to work with. If you ever read Jack Kornfield's first book, which is a worthwhile book, it was called Living Buddhist Masters. They have reissued it, and I think it's got to be in print, still called Living Dharma. And he profiles 12 different Thai and Burmese, I think there is a woman, it's mostly the men, great, well-known teachers. And he talks a little bit of their history and then lays out their path of practice. And just to read the actually intro to the book is worthwhile. So if you're interested, hear some of these from more of the traditional Asian perspective. There's one guy in there, I think he died in the 50s, Sun Lun Sayadaw. And he's sitting there, and his mouth's downturned, and he is like scary looking for real. And here's what his practice is. They have you can go read in the book here. I just got it from the book. They sit there and they do this kind of like, what do they call it when you do super breathing? It's not rebirthing, it's, I forgot what you call it. But some of these, like, you just do this intent, what's that called? Hyperventilating. Yeah, well, it's not meant to be hyperventilating. But it's called rebirthing, or there's some kind of breath work, whatever they call it, breath work you can do. And I've done that once before, and you do it in a certain controlled way, and it can really get you in these altered states, which can be pretty amazing. Well, he gets you sitting there like for a long time, pushing through, breathing for like, I don't know, a few minutes, half hour, I forgot. And then when you're done with that, you're going to sit still, and somehow from it it's supposed to make a lot of pain come up, and then you take a vow to sit for 2 more hours without moving, and they have you take a fist and put it into the other hand and hold it here, so when the pain gets unbearable, you can, it's like we're going to remove the bullet, so bite on this stick. That's what we're talking about here. You can press to get through. And it even says, this way you're confronted with direct reality. That is a bright reality. When you're suffering strong, it's a bright light, granted. Probably for most people, it's going to kind of blow you away. But that's his path. God bless you if you want to go do that. You know me, I'm inclusive, respect all paths, and so maybe it must work for somebody. There are paths like that. What I would offer is you don't have to go seeking suffering. It will find you. Even in the best of lives, the best of circumstances, we all have our areas of pain, of worry, of difficulty, right, that we have to. And when those come, it is, it doesn't always feel like, oh, this is my teacher, especially if it's really hard and a lot of pain. It's just, sometimes you just got to get through it the best you can. It may not be appropriate in that moment to think of it as the teacher, right, at all times. Maybe it's just like, I just got to hang on the best I can. It can be like that. But when we can work with it, we can shift, just like that guy. He unmasked a pattern, and what he showed me in the car was, oh, I still have places, not like I didn't know, but I still have places where my mind can go to ill will, right? And so, he unmasked it, and then I get to kind of just know it, see it, and I can then use that in what, it's the whole thing of how we work. So we can start to change that. If we take on this attitude, though, we've got to know that this is as we go out into life, you're going to have times, those of you have done retreats, we move in and out, where hopefully some of the things we learn and we grow and develop carry with us, yes, and there's all the parts where we're just going to forget, get caught up in everything and just lose it all, and then we can be hard on ourselves and judge ourselves, right? And think, oh, well, I should, or I'm supposed to know, like I know not to act, but it's not like that, because these patterns run deep, and especially if there's people or situations we have a long history with, and it can be very reactive or difficult. So we can know we do the best we can. Now, I happen to know from talking to enough people, and I've been there myself, that people might say, yeah, but I know you're saying I'm doing the best I can, but no, you don't understand, Richard, I'm not really. I could be less reactive. I could meditate more. No, you can't. If you could, you would. So here, I'll tell you what, let me try this. This is another one of those good news, bad news things. The bad news. You're doing the best you can. It looks like this. Good news. You're doing the best you can. It looks like this. You feel the difference there? Just drop the judging about it, right? If this is what it looks like. If you could meditate more, you'd be meditating more. You're trying your best. This is what it looks like. Recognize, if you could do it differently, you would. This is what we're working on. We have these habitual patterns, and so this way of judging ourselves. Remember, I always ask you if I've said this before. It's my poor brain. This idea of manas and conceit. I think I've talked about this here, right? Where, we think if I'm better than or less than, and we can just get into this judging and comparing mind. And we can often fall into judging by how well or good, poorly we think we're doing things. And I offered that if we're going to judge ourselves, a better, more accurate way to judge ourselves is by our intention. That is more accurately true. And when you lose sight of your intention, it's still there. You just lost connection for the moment. It's like I'm looking, it's just socked in with cloud cover out there. Sun didn't go away. It just got covered over for a little while. It's like that, right? The other thing you have to realize is that when we add the self-judgment, I hope I don't sound arrogant, but I'm just going to say it this way. I'm talking to myself too. You are the least qualified to make these assessments about yourself, right? You're not objective. Totally unqualified, right? You're the expert on the lived experience of your life, but what the story you tell yourself, you're not objective, right? So we should keep that in mind. And then we have these ideas, and sorry, I'm just reflecting on something just for a moment here. I got two different streams coming in. It's a funny thing because I'm thinking as we go back into life, I'm trying to sort of set this thing about being the living link of the chain, but what does that mean? It's coming back to that. I'm just trying to get at, you're just bringing your actual self, right? An authentic version of your actual self is what we would like to be able to do. That's not always so easy. But there's this idea, if we could do that, part of that is it's sort of a gift when we can show up to others in an authentic way. And you can tell if people are authentic, right? And it kind of has a certain feeling. So the trick is we want to be the wise elder, if you will, the living link in the chain as the gift to others. How do we do that when we're going to bring all of ourselves, which includes the hurt places, the difficult places, and all the beautiful places? How do we include all? Actually, Matthew, you have a nice quote. Would you be willing to share that quote with the group? Do we have the microphone here somewhere? Oh, I have it. Do you mind coming over and getting it? I'm getting old, getting up and down from this stage. You have a little quote, actually, that Matthew shared that I thought would be it's kind of, I think, would fit right now with this idea of what we might carry forward of ourselves into life. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so the quote is from a book called The Wisdom of No Escape. The author is Pema Chodron. So the quote is, loving kindness, or Maitri in Tibetan, loving kindness toward ourselves doesn't mean getting rid of anything. Maitri means that we can still be crazy after all these years. We can still be angry after all these years. We can still be timid or jealous or full of feelings of unworthiness. The point is not to try to change ourselves. Meditation practice isn't about trying to throw ourselves away and become something better. It's about befriending who we are already. The ground of practice is you or me or whoever we are right now, just as we are. That's the ground. That's what we study. That's what we come to know with tremendous curiosity and interest.
So thank you. So we can just let that sit if that resonates. That resonated for me, that's why it was so, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Just letting ourselves be. Look, and we do the best we can, again, right? We don't want to beat ourselves up because we can't stop beating ourselves up, right? Then that's a tremendous act of love and compassion for ourselves right there, yeah? If we can do that. So the practice, a lot of it, actually we leave that quote alone because it's so good and beautiful. Of course, doing these practices does disentangle a lot of patterns, and we do become, a lot of the unwholesome conditioned patterns do loosen and the wholesome ones do strengthen. So that is part of it also. That's a part of getting somewhere, but we also have to have this foundation of just opening to what is real and true. So there's like that, right? Okay. So just a few more things here. The same idea of not taking. Wes Nisker, he died this last year, but he was one of the Spirit Rock teachers. He had this quote. He was always funny, it was funny, but it was true. He said, "You're not your fault," which I thought was funny. But look, we get these conditioned patterns in us, and it can feel like, but they can change. And I will tell you, I didn't used to believe this, but I'm thinking of two specific incidents of patterns, one in myself, one in my wife, of deeply there's parts of our personality, just part of the fabric of who we are, never going to change. Just change, amazing. So even I now have come to see even the deepest things can shift, right? Also, so we want to become fully who we are, and we're moving in a good direction, sort of both, right? But here's a way to hold it also about this judging thing, So the next time I was telling someone today, I can't remember who it was, about the judging mind. This is one of these patterns that can come up. And I said, I can't remember, but I thought it was kind of funny, but I think it's true. I said, next time I forgot how I said it, when your judging mind comes up, if you remember, you can thank it for sharing, whatever, pat it on the head, you can say, have a seat, and then we can know, if we can remember, that it's just the pattern running, and it's not, you didn't sit down, like if you, for example, if you're here on this retreat, and if you happen to be, we all have what I call the top 10 tunes, the main top ways that we all suffer. We're all different, but some of you are going to have a lot of critical mind for yourself, and of course that will land on other people too. Self-esteem, anxiety, anyway, whatever, all the different issues and ways we deal with things. you didn't sit down and say, okay, here I'm at the retreat, let's see, it's the 11 o'clock sit. I think I'll spend a little time just judging the crap out of everybody. You didn't say that. It happened to you. It's you. So it's personal, but it's also kind of impersonal. It's sort of like, do people still use Microsoft Word and Excel? And that's kind of old school, right? I still do, but anyway. But you get the icon on your computer. If you click on the icon for Microsoft Excel, you're never going to get Microsoft Word. That's what it does. It's going to run the little program and Excel's going to pop up. When the right causes and conditions come together to trigger off whatever your main areas of challenge are, it runs its little program. It doesn't know how to do anything else. That's all it is. We're working on those conditions. That's what the thing is. So we can hold it a little. It doesn't feel great when they come up, but hold it with more of a perspective and not beat ourselves up, knowing we're doing the best we can, right? We can keep that attitude. And so, and actually, I would say, until you're in one of those jars yourself, by definition, you're going to still have greed, hatred, and delusion in your mind. You're not doing anything wrong. Right? It's part of what it is. So we just have to know that and understand it's part of it. And yes, still have our aspiration to move forward in a good way. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about is just a few more things. We all have areas in life of, this is real, where there's real limitations in life, right? Like whatever, I don't know, like, I'm just not going to get on the Edmonton Oilers team, right? I mean, it's silly. It doesn't matter how much I practice, whatever. That's a real, right? They lost last night. And I want you guys to win for happiness because I think you haven't won like since the 80s or something like that, right? Yeah, so everybody wants like that person hadn't won for the 80s. So I don't really care, but I kind of care, right? It's the Oilers and yeah. But they were doing good through the first period. It was tied 1. I went and looked because everybody's talking. And then I think the other guys, the Stars or whatever, scored 2 in the third. I know some of you are nodding. Oh, so you're off looking at your phones. You are busted. All right. So, wait, I totally lost my thing here. Yeah. We have to be patient with ourselves. An image that I have is kind of like of a big oil tanker out at sea, and these things are, they're huge. I don't know, like a few football fields long. They're loaded up with oil. They're heavy, and they're moving. They have a momentum in a certain direction. If you want to turn those things, you've got to probably plan ahead and start planning. And you start turning the rudder, and then it takes time for it. Eventually, it'll be lumber around to get into the new, direction. Because there's a lot of momentum, and so we're like that. We've had these habits for so long, and they run so deep. We have to have love, kindness for ourselves, knowing we're sincere. Everybody here I know is sincere. That's one thing, which is nice to hang out with a bunch of sincere people with great aspirations and intentions. It's pretty nice. Over time, though, these habits, and then the momentum is just in a totally new way, when even if we space out and lose our mindfulness and go unconscious, we naturally just show up in a better way because we've changed it over time. So it can be like that. So I want to leave you this part, and then we'll open up some Q&A. Leave you with this kind of image, which I find I like a lot. So in the Pali Suttas, there's a lot of water imagery of all kinds. There's this, anyway, even in the definition of jhana, those meditative states, there's this idea of like being immersed in water. Many beautiful, beautiful water images that are used. And one of the images is, there's images of rivers and streams, and there's this idea of going against the stream. Some of you have heard about that. It just means like the normal human condition for most people is just following our greed, hatred, and delusion and, whatever. And when we start to not let that, not be at the effect of things like that and choose our own way, we're kind of going against the stream of where the natural pulls are. It's kind of like that. So one of the images, you may have heard of this thing called entering the stream. And the idea of it is that once you've entered gotten into the river or the stream and it carries you, once you've immersed yourself so much, there's no going back. That stream of dharmas just carries us more and more and more. It's like that. And I think of it like this. I grew up I might not know the geography in the U.S., but there's the Mississippi River, giant river, like a mile across, huge. And I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, which is right on the river, and so you can go see this river, and this thing is massive. It's like the Amazon or something. It's big. If you got out in the middle of that in a boat, what is it that's going to happen? You're going to end up in the ocean. Period. Nothing could stop it. Now, it can fool us sometimes because I've been in an airplane flying over, and sometimes there's a few spots where the river's going like this. It goes around a bend, and it almost goes the opposite direction, then bends back around. So, you're in the river, and you're going down, you got your compass, I'm going south, and you're just going, wait a minute, I'm going north. We don't see the big picture, but it comes back. So in our lives, it can feel like sometimes we don't have the big perspective that I've lost the way a little bit. I've gotten off. I'm not. So we'll have our ups and downs about that, but every one of us are in this process of entering the stream, whether you think of it that way or not. You might be dipping your little toe in, maybe test it out with your ankles and your feet. Oh, maybe if I go a little deeper. Some of us are, but we are in this entering the stream. We're immersing ourselves in these qualities that we call dharma. And when you think about it, I'm trying to say this as you go out to life because you might lose some things from retreat, but to be of good cheer as much as you can, because it's actually not possible. This is a double negative. It's not possible that for you to not move towards greater awakening and liberation or enlightenment or whatever word you're not. It's not possible. What is it we're doing? We're consciously applying ourselves to strengthening the good and to not keep feeding the difficult. So the only thing possible is that those will strengthen and the others will weaken. I mean, it's literally, I've never met anyone who didn't feel like being in the path of Dharma, however much you engage or not, but you bring it into your life, that it doesn't keep growing. And so I hope you'll carry with you that as you move out into life, because again, we're going to go back into the real life, and it will be what it is, and we're going to bring the best we can. We're going to let all the, hopefully, that's not easy to do. I think it's beautiful the way Pema Chodron articulated it. We'll do our best. And just remember that when you can remember and when the difficulty settles down, you can always go back and feel into your good heart. Once you're in touch with the good heart, you may be in the grouchy heart, I know, but and you've always got that with you, there, carry. So that's just a few things maybe to carry some thoughts about letting life be our teacher and stepping into our role as the living link in the chain and doing the best we can. So it's like that. So I appreciate your kind attention. And all right, so now we're going to shift. We'll have a little time for some questions, if there are any, and then we'll do just a closing. Yeah.